Let me ask you something very simple but very important. What is the most critical stretch of water on Earth right now? It is not the Pacific, not the Atlantic, and not the South China Sea. It is a narrow passage only about 21 miles wide at its tightest point, squeezed between Iran on one side and Oman on the other. 21 miles, that's less than a half-hour drive. Yet this small channel, the Strait of Hormuz, is the key gateway for roughly 20% of all global oil trade every single day. 1/5 of the world's energy passes through it like a lifeline. If that strait were ever blocked, the global economy would immediately seize up. Japan would run critically low on oil within months. South Korea's industrial system would come under severe strain. China's massive manufacturing engine, the one that produces everything from smartphones to household appliances, would begin to slow dramatically. Europe, already weakened by the Ukraine conflict and heavily dependent on imported energy, would face serious economic paralysis. All of this depends on just 21 miles of water. And that is why the United States and China are now indirectly locked in competition over it, with stakes higher than anything seen in modern history. But most people in both the West and the East are misunderstanding what is actually happening. The common narrative says this is a conflict involving the United States and Iran. People talk about nuclear programs, regime change, political strategy, or Israel's security concerns. Those factors exist, but they are not the core issue. At a deeper level, this is a struggle between the United States and China over the global energy system. It is about who controls the future of the petrodollar. It is about who will sit at the center of the world economy in the 21st century. And the Strait of Hormuz is the real battleground where this contest is unfolding. To understand this, you first need to understand the petrodollar system. Since the 1970s, a quiet but powerful agreement has existed between Washington and Riyadh. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states agreed to price their oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, the United States provided military protection, security guarantees, and political backing to those governments. This arrangement created a massive structural advantage for the US because every major economy, China, India, Japan, South Korea, Germany, needed dollars to purchase energy. Global demand for the US currency remained permanently high. This allowed the United States to run large trade deficits, borrow cheaply, and fund both its military operations and domestic spending at the same time, something no other country could replicate. The petrodollar system is not just financial, it is the foundation of American global power. Without it, the United States becomes simply another large economy burdened by debt. Now China enters the equation. China is the world's largest oil importer, and most of that oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Chinese leaders fully understand how dependent their economy is on this route. Their entire system, export-driven growth, industrial expansion, and the political stability of the Communist Party depends on uninterrupted energy flow through this narrow passage. At the same time, China recognizes something even more critical. If the United States gains effective control over the Strait of Hormuz by dominating Iran or securing firm influence over Gulf states, then China's energy security becomes dependent on American decisions. That is a strategic vulnerability Beijing cannot accept. It is not temporary, it is structural, and China has spent decades trying to reduce that dependency. That is why every development in the Middle East is being watched extremely closely in Beijing. Every military move, every airstrike, every diplomatic shift, every disruption in oil shipping is analyzed in real time. Reports of Chinese military cargo flights into Iran, quiet logistical support, and back-channel diplomacy are not random events. They are part of a broader strategic pattern. China understands that what happens in the Persian Gulf will shape its economic and political future for decades. To make sense of this, it helps to use a game theory concept: credible commitment. In international relations, a credible commitment is an action that convinces others your future behavior is predictable. The United States is trying to convince Gulf countries that it can guarantee their security and protect oil flows. As long as that belief holds, these countries continue to price oil in dollars and recycle their revenues into American financial markets, reinforcing the system. But the problem is credibility. Every time the United States fails to achieve quick or decisive results in the region, that credibility weakens. When Iranian forces absorb strikes and continue operating, when US bases are attacked, when shipping lanes remain unstable, confidence in American protection declines. Countries like Japan, South Korea, India, and Saudi Arabia begin to ask a critical question. Can the United States still guarantee stability? If the answer shifts toward uncertainty, the entire system begins to fracture. This is exactly the opportunity China has been preparing for. China does not need direct military confrontation. It simply needs the United States to remain stuck in a prolonged, unresolved conflict. As long as instability continues and no clear victory is achieved, doubts about American reliability grow. Every delayed resolution, every disrupted oil shipment, every extended conflict becomes data for global economies reconsidering their dependence on the dollar system. Over time, this supports China's broader strategy of building alternatives. The yuan-based trade systems, Belt and Road infrastructure, currency swap agreements, and regional organizations designed to reduce reliance on U.S. financial dominance. China's goal is not immediate victory. It is strategic patience. If the United States wins decisively in Iran and restores full control over the Strait of Hormuz, the petrodollar system is reinforced and China returns to dependency. But if the United States fails to achieve its objectives and becomes overstretched, a different outcome emerges. Iran retains influence over the strait, regional states adjust to new realities, and China becomes a central economic partner in a more multipolar system. In that scenario, China does not dominate through force. It becomes the stabilizing connector among regional powers. That is the long-term vision guiding its behavior. This is why some analysts compare the situation to historical overreach, like Athens in the Sicilian expedition. Great powers often expand beyond what is strategically sustainable, driven by confidence and momentum. The United States has experienced similar cycles in Afghanistan, Iraq, and now the Middle East. Initial military superiority does not guarantee long-term control over outcomes shaped by geography, resistance, and endurance. Iran, for its part, is fighting for survival and sovereignty. That creates a strong internal motivation to resist pressure over time. The United States, however, is engaged in a more complex set of objectives, protecting alliances, maintaining regional influence, and preserving global financial systems. These are not unified national survival goals, and that makes sustained mobilization more difficult. No amount of military technology can fully resolve that imbalance. Force can destroy infrastructure, but it cannot eliminate political will. Ultimately, everything returns to the Strait of Hormuz. Whoever influences that passage holds leverage over global energy flows. If Iran maintains partial control, major Asian economies face serious pressure and will be forced to respond, either through diplomacy or strategic realignment. At that point, the world faces a fundamental choice: continue under a system where one dominant power manages global energy flows through the dollar, or move toward a more distributed structure where regional powers control regional resources and multiple currencies share influence. China has already positioned itself for the second outcome. The United States continues to defend the first, and the Strait of Hormuz is where these two visions collide. History suggests that empires rarely recognize the moment their influence begins to decline. They often believe one more escalation will restore control, but structural forces, energy dependency, economic realignment, and long-term strategic planning do not reverse quickly. The final outcome is still unfolding, shaped by decisions made in real time by governments, militaries, and shipping routes passing through those 21 miles of water. But the direction of pressure is already visible, and everything now depends on the Strait of Hormuz.